The sun was bleeding into the horizon, melting into a blaze of amber and rose over the Wyoming plains. The last of the daylight danced across the dry grass, brushing it with gold. A soft wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and pine from the distant hills. The ranch was quiet now, the kind of quiet that came only after a long day's work. Horses grazed lazily near the fence line, their tails flicking away flies, while a lone hawk circled above in the fading sky. Maria stood by the fence, the worn wood rough beneath her palms. She stared out over the pasture, though her mind was miles away. The land stretched endlessly before her, vast, rugged, beautiful, but it wasn't what weighed heavy on her heart. It was what she had to say. What she'd been carrying for years. What she feared would change everything. Behind her, the sound of boots on gravel broke the silence. The rhythm was slow, steady, she'd know that sound anywhere. Cole Hartley. The cowboy who'd shown up in her life like a quiet storm. He had a way about him that made people stop and breathe a little easier. A man who spoke little, worked hard, and smiled like he knew secrets about the world that no one else did. He came to stand beside her, resting his arm on the fence. For a long moment, he said nothing. They just stood there, watching the sky turn from gold to deep crimson, the silence between them thick with something unspoken. "You've been quieter than usual," he finally said, voice low and gentle. Quieter than a shadow in church. She almost smiled at that, almost. But her chest tightened again. "Just thinking," she said, trying to sound casual, but her voice came out thin. He tilted his head slightly, studying her profile. "Thinking's fine," he said. "But when thinking starts weighing you down, that's when it turns into worry. You look like you're carrying something mighty heavy." Maria swallowed hard. She could feel his eyes on her, steady and kind, the way they always were. That made it harder somehow. Because she knew what she was about to say might change that warmth into pity, or worse, distance. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. Before we go any further." Cole didn't flinch or speak. He just nodded, his gaze never leaving her face. "I can't have children," she said finally, forcing the words out. They hung in the air like dust after a stampede, heavy and slow to settle. "Doctors told me years ago. It's not something that can be fixed. I thought you should know, before you start thinking I'm someone I can't be." For a few seconds, the only sound was the distant cry of the hawk overhead. Maria's heart hammered painfully in her chest. She couldn't look at him. She stared down at the ground instead, at her worn boots half buried in dirt, waiting for him to say something, anything. Then she heard it, a low chuckle. Not cruel or mocking, but warm, surprised, and full of something she didn't expect, relief. "Good," he said, a grin tugging at his mouth. "I've got enough kids for both of us." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "What?" Cole's grin deepened as he nodded toward the far end of the pasture. There, 3 small figures ran through the grass, 2 boys and a girl, laughing as they chased a calf that clearly wanted no part of their game. "My kids," he said softly, pride in his voice. "After my wife passed, it's been just me and them. They've been hoppin' for someone with enough sense to keep me in line. Guess you might just be that someone." Maria stared at him, her lips parting but no words coming out. She felt the tears sting her eyes before she could stop them. All this time, she had feared this truth would drive him away, feared that no man would ever want her once he knew. But this man, this quiet, steady cowboy, had just smiled and turned her deepest sorrow into something light. "I don't understand," she whispered, wiping at her cheeks. "You're not upset." "Upset?" Cole laughed softly. "Maria, I've been raisin' these young'uns for 6 years. Between school, chores, and patchin' up scraped knees, I've had my hands full since the day I buried their mama. I ain't lookin' to start all over with diapers and midnight feedings. I'm lookin' for a woman with heart enough to stand beside us, not one to give me more mouths to feed." He leaned against the fence again, his gaze fixed on the glowing horizon. "Truth is, I was scared too," he admitted. "Scared you'd want more than I could give. I ain't rich, and I sure ain't perfect. But I've got love enough to go around, and maybe that's all that matters." Maria felt her chest tighten, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was something different, something warm and alive. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man who fixed fences and rode horses with ease, but the man who carried a family on his shoulders, who had known loss and still smiled anyway. He turned his eyes to her then, deep and steady as the land around them. "Maria," he said quietly, "family ain't just blood. It's the folks who show up. The ones who stay. The ones who love you, no matter what." She didn't realize she was crying until he reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek, his thumb gentle against her skin. "You've been through hell, I can tell," he murmured. "But maybe it's time you stopped thinking about what you can't give, and start remembering what you still can." Her lips trembled, and she let out a soft laugh through the tears. "And what's that?" He smiled, eyes warm and sure. "Love, patience, a home. You got more of those in you than anyone I've ever met." The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the field. The kids' laughter drifted toward them, bright and careless, like a promise that life could still be good. Cole reached down, his rough hand finding hers. His touch was firm but gentle, grounding her to the moment. She squeezed his hand back, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Real, quiet hope. The sky darkened into indigo, and the stars began to blink to life one by one. Maria leaned against the fence again, shoulder brushing his. For the first time, she didn't feel broken. She didn't feel less than. She just felt right. Cole tipped his hat back, still watching the horizon. "You know," he said, his tone half teasing, "you'd make a fine ranch woman. I can see it already." Maria smiled, her voice soft but steady now. "Guess we'll find out, won't we?" "Reckon we will," he said with a grin. And as the night settled over the land, the wind carried the faint laughter of children and the quiet hum of two hearts learning that love, real love, ain't about what's missing, but what's still possible. Morning light spilled over the Wyoming hills, soft and golden, warming the wide valley that stretched out around the Hartley Ranch. The air smelled of hay, coffee, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers carried on the breeze. Inside the old farmhouse, the kitchen was alive with sound, pans clattering, the sizzle of bacon, and the laughter of children echoing through the wooden beams. Maria stood by the stove, her hair loosely tied back, wearing one of Cole's oversized flannel shirts that nearly swallowed her. She flipped a batch of biscuits from the oven and smiled as the buttery scent filled the room. The old radio on the shelf hummed softly with country tunes, the kind that made the morning feel slower and kinder. Behind her, small footsteps pitter-pattered across the floor. Luke, the youngest, with wild blonde curls and a mischievous grin, peeked up at the counter. His brown eyes sparkled with intent as he stretched his little arm toward the plate of bacon cooling nearby. "Don't even think about it," Maria warned gently, hiding her amusement. Luke froze, his hand inches from the prize. "But Miss Maria," he pleaded, "Pa always says a cowboy's gotta be fast if he wants to survive." She turned, spatula in hand, and gave him a look that was part stern, part playful. "You planning on surviving breakfast or stealing it?" He grinned, unbothered. "Both." Before she could answer, he snatched a slice and bolted for the back door, laughter trailing behind him. Maria shook her head, trying not to laugh. "You better run, partner," she called after him. Just then, Cole walked in from outside, dust on his boots and his hat pushed back on his head. His eyes crinkled with amusement as he watched Luke dart across the yard, bacon in hand. "Is that boy causing trouble again?" he asked, stepping close enough to steal a biscuit from the tray. Maria folded her arms, arching an eyebrow. "Like father, like son, I suppose." Cole chuckled, brushing a kiss against her forehead before she could move away. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said with that slow, easy grin that had undone her since the day they met. The other two children, Emma, the eldest at 12, and little Jack, a year younger, came bounding in, chattering about the new calf that had been born overnight. They crowded around Maria, eager to tell her every detail. She listened, smiling, kneeling so she could look them in the eyes as they spoke. Emma wrapped her arms around Maria's neck without warning. "You make the best biscuits," she declared. Maria's heart swelled, and for a moment, she couldn't find her voice. She simply hugged the girl tighter, breathing in the scent of sun and hay that clung to her hair. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. When the table was finally set, the family gathered around. Cole bowed his head, his voice deep and steady as he led the morning prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for another sunrise, another meal, and the hands that made it. Amen." Maria opened her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The sound of laughter, the clatter of plates, the way Luke's crumbs ended up everywhere, it wasn't perfect, but it was home. After breakfast, Cole and the kids headed out to the pasture for morning chores. Maria followed, holding a basket of clean rags. The sun had climbed higher now, spilling warmth across the fields. The horses stood near the fence, tails flicking, while the cattle grazed lazily in the distance. She leaned on the porch rail, watching Cole work. There was something about the way he moved, steady, patient, certain, that made her heart ache in the best way. He was teaching Jack how to hammer a fence post straight, guiding his small hands with his own. Emma was helping hold the wire taut, her braids swaying in the breeze. Luke, of course, had already wandered off to chase butterflies. "Careful, son," Cole said with a grin. "Don't hit your thumb. Hurts worse than heartbreak." Maria laughed softly, the sound carried by the wind. Cole glanced up at her, and their eyes met across the yard. His gaze lingered, warm, full of quiet affection. He tipped his hat at her before returning to his work. It was such a simple moment, yet it filled her chest with a feeling she hadn't known in years. Peace. The kind of peace that didn't come from silence, but from belonging. When the work was done, the kids ran to the barn to fetch lemonade, leaving Maria and Cole by the fence. He leaned against it, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The sunlight caught on the curve of his jaw, the dust on his shirt, the easy strength in his posture. "You sure you're holding up all right?" he asked, glancing at her. "They can be a handful, especially that little rascal of mine." Maria smiled. "They're wonderful. I didn't realize how much I missed this kind of noise, the kind that means life's happening all around you." Cole looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening. "You fit right in, you know that." She turned toward him, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "You think so?" "I know so," he said simply. "They adore you. And he hesitated, his voice growing quieter. "I can't remember the last time I saw this place feel so alive." Maria felt her throat tighten. "You don't know what that means to me, Cole. For a long time, I thought I'd never have this, any of it. Love, family, laughter. I thought that part of life was gone for good." Cole reached out, brushing his calloused fingers against her hand. "Life's funny that way," he said. "Sometimes it takes things from us so we can learn what really matters." She looked up at him, eyes glistening in the sunlight. "And what matters to you?" He smiled, a slow, sure, heart-deep smile. "Right now, you, them, this." He gestured to the fields stretching before them, the laughter of children drifting through the air. "A home that feels full again." Her breath caught. For a long time, she'd thought of herself as a woman with an empty heart. But here, in this place, surrounded by dusty boots and wildflowers, she realized that emptiness had been waiting for something beautiful to fill it. That evening, the family gathered on the porch as the sun went down. The sky turned to molten gold, and crickets began to sing. Cole played a slow tune on his old harmonica, and the kids danced barefoot in the yard. Maria sat beside him, her hand resting over his. Luke ran up the steps, out of breath. "Miss Maria, when you and Pa get married, can I still call you Miss Maria?" Maria laughed softly, glancing at Cole. "I think you can call me whatever you like." Cole chuckled, pulling her a little closer. "Careful, Luke, she might make you call her, Ma." The boy grinned wide. "That'd be okay too." Tears stung Maria's eyes before she could stop them. She looked out over the land, the golden fields, the fading light, and felt her heart settle. She had come here broken, convinced she had nothing left to give. But now, as Cole's arm wrapped around her and the children's laughter filled the night, she understood something she never had before. Motherhood wasn't just about giving birth. It was about love, presence, and care. And she had all of that to give in abundance. Cole turned his head slightly, his voice a low murmur against her ear. "Told you, Maria," he said. "Family's what we make it." She smiled, leaning into him as the first stars appeared overhead. "And I wouldn't change a thing." The night deepened, the ranch settling into a peaceful hush. The world beyond seemed far away, and all that remained was the soft rustle of the wind, the warmth of the man beside her, and the steady, unshakable truth that love, real love, had found her when she least expected it.